The transition from penny press to yellow journalism impacted how the women's suffrage movement was depicted in the media. Yellow journalism focused on sensationalizing the news, and when it came to covering the suffrage movement, newspapers made no exception. Cartoons and other forms of illustration that dramatized the suffrage movement became commonplace over time. Due to the media's role as an agenda setter, these cartoons may have directly impacted public opinion on the women's right to vote. In the 1830s, when the penny press took hold of the media landscape, the right to vote was not guaranteed for all American citizens. Only white men were eligible to vote at this time. In America, the women's suffrage movement began in 1848 with the Seneca Falls Convention. According to an advertisement placed in the Seneca County Courier on July 14, 1848, the convention was meant to discuss the social, civil, and religious conditions and rights of women. Many prominent suffrage figures were at the convention and set forth to get women the right to vote. The suffrage movement truly took off after the conclusion of the Civil War in 1863. The penny press was a product of its economic, social, and political environment. The penny press claimed political independence and typically favored news over opinion pieces. The women's suffrage movement was covered as news and typically delivered in a text format. At this time, the first newspaper dedicated solely to covering the suffrage movement emerged. The Una was founded in 1853 as a feminist and pro-suffrage paper. It was made up of written stories about political candidates, protests, and other related happenings. Some true penny papers, like the New York Tribune, published articles supporting the movement. Many papers, though, were less supportive. In 1853, the New York Herald wrote that the attendees of the National Women's Rights Conventions were unsexed in mind and called the entire convention the Women's Wrong Convention. The penny papers, more than anything else, cared about keeping costs low, which meant rarely publishing illustrations. However, some were published in specialty papers. The Modern Cornelia, a veritable roman, was published in 1869 in Frank Leslie's illustrated newspaper. The black and white illustration was anti-suffragist. As yellow journalism and cartoons took over in the 1890s, the sensational nature of yellow journalism allowed anti-suffragists to depict women in the suffrage movement in vulgar, violent, and dramatized ways. Yellow journalism did not prioritize the truth. Instead, it focused on creating flashy headlines, lavish illustrations, and even fraudulent stories. The yellow cartoons produced by anti-suffragists did not offer a nuanced opinion about the movement or give audiences facts about the movement. Many early yellow cartoons were produced by anti-suffragists. It was not until later that suffragists began to use sensational cartoons to their advantage. Many of these cartoons encouraged people to support the movement or depicted the movement's successes. Suffragists also continued to publish independent newspapers during the age of yellow journalism. The Common Cause covered international women's rights movements and provided updates on domestic women's issues. The Suffragist was another paper dedicated to the cause. The paper's June 1919 cover featured a cartoon that showcased justice hugging American womanhood. In 1920, the ratification of the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote in America. The women's suffrage movement wore on through the era of the penny press and into the age of yellow journalism. Cartoons became an easy way to depict women and suffragists as crazy and stupid. Yellow journalism did not have an interest in accurately depicting the movement. Suffragists responded by creating their own papers, which centered written communication and showcased the movement as they saw it. In the end, suffragists were successful, and the consequences of negative media portrayal could not stop the movement.